Hello, welcome to my channel, another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and I am a judge for nonfiction in the Octofinal rounds for the BookTube Prize. I am beginning this for my vlog for each book that I read. By its very necessity, I have to do this as a blog because I will eventually release what I think initially of each book as they drop off the BookTube Prize nominations, the ones that pass on to the next round. I will withhold until they either win a prize or get dropped. And that is my introduction. Okay, before I get into the vlog again for the books that did not pass on to the next round, I wanted to give my rankings for Group C in the nonfiction octofinal round. In sixth place was Bodywork by Melissa Phoebos. Fifth place, Translating Myself and Others by Yampia Lahari. Fourth place was Free by Leah Yapi. Third place, Fourth Time We Drowned by Sally Hayden. Number 2, How to Stand Up to a Dictator by Maria Ressa. And in first place was Secret City by James Kirchick. A little bit of a surprise here. The only book that I voted for in the around we get to pick your books was How to Stand Up to a Dictator. The others were books that I had initially passed on. Secret City was a surprise to me. I'm surprised that I liked that book, but I'm not going to say anything else because it's going to be passing on to the next round, and I want judges not to be influenced. Not that I really have a whole lot of influence. I have just finished my fourth book for the BookTube Prize Nonfiction Octofinal round, and that was Free by Leah Yapi. This is the memoir of the author who grew up in communist Albania during the mid-80s and 90s. And it is mostly the story of her childhood and teenage years and how it was growing up in that country. And it is a fairly interesting biography, or I should not say biography, I should say memoir. There's a lot of details that I just did not know about growing up in the socialist country of Albania. And the author herself describes it as socialist, working towards communism. And it was a pretty rough place to grow up. I'm going to show you a little prop. You know what this is? This is a can of Coke. A can of Coke, an empty can of Coke, features in a chapter and how much of a status symbol it could be for a family to have an ornamental Coke can in their home. And it was an object that was subject to theft. Now, when I drink my Coke, I'm going to throw this can in the recycling bin. But when she was growing up, that was something special to have. And you get a very strong feel of just the oppressiveness of the authoritarian socialist / communist regime, however you really want to call it. And I can see why a lot of conservatives are so frightened by socialism. However, this memoir also tells you how socialism came to an end in Albania, and how the author, growing up, immigrated out of Albania to study at university and actually studied philosophy and became a teacher of sociology, and how her sociology is actually different from what was happening in Albania. And that is not something to fear, at least from the final chapter of this book. I kind of wish that a lot more of the book was focused on that philosophy and maybe just a little less about her personal remembrances of growing up in this country. But it's kind of interesting because she talks about Uncle Envar. He was the dear leader of Albania. And you had to be very careful about what you said about dear leader. We've seen that before in memoirs of these repressive regimes. But is it a good book? Yes, it is ultimately a good book, but it is not a great book. Ultimately, I don't know how this is going to pan out in the final tally of the BookTube prize. I can see some people being attracted to this, how she is a strong woman in many ways by getting out of Albania and making a career in philosophy for herself. So that's essentially what this book is about. I did enjoy it. I can recommend it, but again, it's not going to make it to the top of my lists for the year in nonfiction. I have finished my third book for the BookTube Prize Nonfiction 2023, and that was Translating Myself and Others by Jompa Lahiri. I actually listened to the audio book, but again, I checked out the physical copy of the book, in this case, a digital copy, because my cheap-ass library doesn't carry books like this. But I did check out the library book in a digital format. And this is about the author who originally wrote her first few books in English, and then she started writing books in Italian after she moved to Rome. And it's an interesting experience when she talks about how an author can switch languages. She mentions a couple of other cases, such as Samuel Beckett, who originally wrote in English and then switched to French, and Vladimir Nabokov, who originally wrote in Russian and then switched into writing into English. So bilingual authorship. There quite little fascinating tidbit in there. But more so, it was about her work as a translator, how she translated another author's novels from Italian into English, and then eventually translating her own Italian novel into English. So that's fascinating. Translation is a very much of an art form in and of itself. How you translate and how you take the author's original words from one language and turn them into another language that keeps the author's original intent intact. So you can read that work and say, yes, that is what the author meant to say. In her case, when she was translating a novel from Italian, she had access to the author, and she could talk about it with the author. And the author was educated enough to understand her English and read it and say, yes, that represents me, that in English from my Italian original. Now, my only problem with this book is that I think this is a very narrow focus. Not a lot of people in general will be interested to read about the art of translation and the journey this woman goes through in translating works. For me, I found it fascinating. I don't speak a foreign language fluently. I know just a wee bit of Spanish. I can suss out a couple of Spanish sentences from a book, but I cannot read a whole book in Spanish. But I really enjoyed just listening to her talk about her process and her thought ideas, what it's like to be a translator. Ultimately, I don't think this book is going to go very far in the BookTube Prize. It's unfortunate, but it's up against some very heavy hitters of books that have a lot of contemporary content, which is important, and a couple other books which are really well researched and well written. So while I did enjoy this one quite a bit, I don't think it's going to go very far in the Book 2 prize. Who knows what other people like? I am often very surprised at what captivates other people, but we shall see. I have finished my 5th book for the Book 2 prize Octofinal round. That was Bodywork by Melissa Phoebos, The Radical Power of Personal Narrative. Now, again, this was an audiobook. I was not able to obtain a physical hardcover to review like I've been trying to do with at least some of the other books. My library out here in the sticks has chosen not to carry this book. But I did listen to the audiobook. The author, when she was younger, in her early 20s, was a heroin addict and a professional dominatrix sex worker. And her first book was called Whip Smart. I have not read this one, but this one was written, and she's older. It is part personal memoir and part writing advice, especially how to write about a topic that most people aren't going to write about, sex. And what did I actually think about this? Parts of this book were interesting. It talked about a little bit about her life as a professional dominatrix. Then it went in how when she was 26, she wanted to write a novel, and that how all 26-year-olds have the world's greatest novel in them. And how she eventually started writing about her time as a dominatrix. And then it goes into how writing, especially writing about sex, is personally liberating for the author. It gets the author in tune with their inner selves, let's just say. And why it was technically interesting in parts, it just did not speak to me as a reader. I would really not be all that interested in writing about my sex life. She talked about an assignment where, as a teacher, she assigned her students to write, was it 5 things or 7 things about their sex lives, and gave her some time to write it. And then after they were done, she says, go write it again, but write something different. And then all the students wrote it. Third time she says, okay, same thing, write something different. And it went on. I think she made the students do that like 5 or 7 times again. And I'm thinking, I was a student, I would be fuming. I would just be making crap up about my sex life, thinking about the last naughty Western that I read or something like that, and inserting that in. Now, who knows? Maybe she would think that'd be great that I'd be incorporating my the fictional sexapades that I read and incorporate them as if they were my own. Who knows? But as a book, it did not grasp me. Maybe I'm not the right audience for this. Why it is not explicitly said this book is written for women. I sort of just got that impression that this was a book for women to write about journalism, talk about their own sexual experiences in an own private way. That's sort of how I figured that. And honestly, it just did not move me at all. It's an okay book. It was adequately written. I don't think she's a great writer. I would never seek out more books by this author unless it just sort of happened to come up in like another Book 2 prize or a readathon or a book group. But that's about it. Not such a great book.